Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well. Please, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly? Perfect. Thank you. I think we can actually begin. Let me just share my screen quickly. So whilst I'm sharing my screen, just a bit of an update. All of your ICE tasks has been posted on ARC already. You'll see each one of them has a point or a mark out of 10. Um, my opinion or my advice is try and stick to the sort of soft view on the pacer. It does help because you're not crowded or trying to do something lastminute.com towards the end of semester. However, the hard deadline is on the 8th of May. So I need at least 5 days to go get through all of the grading. And yeah, basically, I set the deadline for 5 days before faculty requires the ICE task results. So I will capture. So as you submit, I will it and I'll capture it on Student Portal as well as on ARC. So you can check out your results. We can work through it throughout the semester. If you not understanding something, I can have a call with you, or we can go through it on WhatsApp, whatever makes you more comfortable, or I can even address it in class itself. You just need to tell me what the best options are. Your assignment one, I have not checked today. The last time I checked was on Friday afternoon, and I didn't see any releases yet. I will check after this session. I am having a problem downloading the assignment because it is a viewing only option on student material. I may not be able to download it, but I have asked for faculty to basically send it to me the moment it's released. So I will post that on. So you have access to the assignment. I prefer to post it because a lot of times what happens is students get a bit confused and they end up doing assignment one in assignment two space and vice versa. And it just doesn't work out that way. So as soon as I get it, I will post it and we'll take it forward from there. Okay. So I think we'll begin today's session, and we are going over Learning Unit 2, Theme 1, as well as Theme 2. I'll obviously post the slides and the recording post this session, but I think we are sort of on par in terms of what we need to do. Next week's session, I will have a recorded session. I think it's a Learning Unit 2, Theme 3, if I'm not mistaken, is in the recorded session. So the recording or the recorded sessions when we don't have a live lecture, that session will be fairly short. So anything between 20 minutes to half an hour, because I'm probably just covering one theme out of a learning unit, as opposed to us doing majority of it in the live lecture. It's not always fun talking to yourself when you're doing the recording. So yeah, we'll get started with that. So with Learning Unit 2, Theme 1 and 2, we are going over strategic sourcing. I think that's a little bit better. So when we're speaking about strategic sourcing, especially in supply chain management, we want to understand what it is. And the first thing is you want to analyze how a business's, how they purchase items, whether it's a raw material, whether it's a semi-finished good, and basically how they now develop a strategy to meet the needs of their purchasing requirements. In the most efficient way, in the most cost-effective way. You want to try and do something like, that's less traditional, because more traditional basically focuses on having shorter term transactions, meaning that you wake up today, you decide you want an item, you go out, you buy it, and you come back. You're not strategically trying to find a partner or a supplier that can provide you with a service where if you are in um, a, a space where you need to provide a lot more demand than what you had forecasted for, they're able to supply you with raw materials, or economies of scale, meaning that you need more than what is required so that you have a cheaper unit cost. So you want something that where your decisions are a little bit more strategic as opposed to just on the whim doing a purchase. So when we're talking about strategic sourcing specifically, the first thing is you want to have a good supplier relationship. So you want to build, you want to maintain strong relationships, especially with key suppliers. So if you look at your supplier list, let's say it's the top 5 spending suppliers that you have, you want to be able to focus on having a strategic long-term relationship with them, so that you have a little bit more reliability with the supplier. So we like, for instance, I'm a supplier to many customers, obviously from a logistics perspective, but whenever a supplier or a customer has to call me because they need something done urgently, because of my relationship that I have with them, I'm able to expedite it. But if it's somebody that, it is more of a traditional purchase, it doesn't happen often, I try and follow more of the book around them. So follow more processes, making sure that they follow through a payment portal, whatever the case may be. You go more of the process-driven approach as opposed to a making a plan approach. So a lot of times when we're looking at supplier relationship, you want to be able to work closely with the suppliers also to build quality of the product. So you work together when you are pre-planning a specific line item that you require. You also can look at different ways of how you can reduce costs. And also your suppliers, especially if they're bigger suppliers, they tend to understand where tech and innovation sits in their business in a developed or a developing country. So a lot of times they're able to bring in that ideas or those specific technological factors into their business to optimize it a lot more. So yeah, that is basically supplier relationship in a nutshell. The next one is TCO, which we call total cost of ownership, where here you're not just considering the purchase price of those items or the different services, but all of the associated costs, whether it is logistics or maintenance or an after sales or a disposal aspect, where you understand the true cost of the entire life cycle of that specific product or that specific material. Then we look at market analysis, and here you want to understand the supply market, where there is the different forces of supply and demand. You're able to make informed decisions about different sourcing strategies that you want, whether it is looking at the different risks that that go with it, whether it is looking at how stable the supply is, maybe it's looking at political factors, like, for instance, what's happening right now with Iran, the Russia-Ukraine situation, and then different market trends that happen. Maybe a supply or a customer decides that they don't want a product anymore. So what is that market analysis based on the different trends that's happening with your customer itself? Then we have a spend analysis. So when we're looking at spend analysis, you want to look at historic spending in order for you to understand what opportunities there are for cost saving. So if you know you're using the supplier for 5 years, you want to go back in year one to look at how you've purchased from the supplier, what different cost savings were in place. Look at different factors like how can you consolidate a lot better? How can you maybe negotiate a better term? So instead of paying the customer in 30 days, can you now pay him in 60 or 90 days so that you have more resources and funds available? Or can you maybe looking at an alternative material or an alternative service that they offer? So looking at different options. I know when I was looking after the big account, it's quite a large FMCG, they had gone through major cost cutting aspects. So as a supplier, obviously, I don't want to reduce revenue any more than the next person. However, in order for you to retain a customer, you need to look at alternative options. So an alternative option became, how can I move your items from point A to point B without impacting service too much? So creating a new customer expectation, but also reducing your cost. So maybe instead of me delivering it in by 10 o'clock the next morning, can I now deliver it during the course of the day? So changing a specific service type, maybe it is introducing different authorization techniques in your business. So how people's human behavior is if I have to go and ask my manager for permission every time I want to send something on the same day, I tend to change my behavior because I don't want to approach him or her asking them for permission all the time. So instead of me sending something from Durban to Cape Town on the same day network, which is pretty expensive, I now decide, okay, let me rather send it next day. It doesn't make sense for me to send it same day. So it's now changing people's behavior and looking at all of that. Then we go into risk management. And here it is understanding or identifying any sort of possible risks in the supply chain and finding ways of how you can best mitigate those risks, whether it means diversifying your supplier. So I know pre-COVID, what was happening is people stuck to one supplier, whether you were a supplier in China, for instance, or Pakistan or India, let's say in the textile industry, you stuck to one supplier, you got economies of scale, you got it here in 30 to 35 days, you know what your landed cost was going to be, you knew all of this information. But the moment COVID had hit, your 30 to 35-day transit time now became 90 to 120-day transit time, which now didn't make sense for your supply chain. So by diversifying your supplier, maybe finding a backup supplier that's more local, where you can get stuff a lot more quicker or urgently, even if it is more of a transactional basis, you are looking at other options, basically. Or even you want to be able to have different contingency plans or negotiate more sort of flexible contracts with different service providers or suppliers. And then the last one is looking at sustainability and looking at ethics. So making sure that your decision on which supplier to go for aligns with your business's values, whether it is a sustainability value, whether it's ethical sourcing, or just like a CSR. So I'm giving you a lot of examples today on customers that I've had, but I have another customer that within their business, they run a NPO. So part of their package with us was you we give you the business and in return you give us a rebate that goes towards our NPO. So aligning yourselves with suppliers that actually gives back to you, whether it is through your CSR campaign, maybe you have an NPO within your business, but making sure that you do have sustainable aspects to your sourcing decisions. So in essence, the end of the day, you want to integrate all of these elements together and ensure that your strategic sourcing and whatever decision you're making helps your business to make sure that your supply chain is as optimized as possible. You want to reduce your costs as much and have the best quality and the most reliable product. And you need a supplier that's going to help you cross that finishing line at the end of the day. Okay, so that's basically strategic sourcing. We now want to move into what we call make or buy decisions. So more commonly, we want to look at outsourcing. So outsourcing is very popular. Whether it's from a business perspective, anybody for that matter, at some point or another, we outsource something, whether it's a specific service or whether it's us purchasing raw materials from somebody or they utilizing a specific line item in their factory where they're manufacturing a part for your product as a finished good. But outsourcing is very important, especially in this module, because it comes out almost all of the time. So NB put an asterisk next to this chapter or this learning unit. It is very important. It almost always comes out, whether it is from a specific case study, where they will ask you about the different drivers or the different, from an outsourcing perspective or the making perspective. So, or both. Just learn and understand this portion of it. Okay, so I try and do things a little bit off record so that I make it more realistic for you to understand, if that makes sense. So when we're looking at outsourcing specifically, this is where you are buying materials or components from suppliers instead of you making it for yourself. So it's contracting the business out to somebody um, that probably perform the same function in your business or left your business or is a sort of supplier and expert in that specific business. There is a lot of that. When we're talking about the make option is the complete opposite. It's where you're basically making the item yourself internally within your business. There is no outsourcing of it at all. So when you make or buy, that specific decision that you make can have a big impact on where you're sitting at from a competition perspective. So a lot of businesses, they buy their material and offer suppliers rather than making it. Or even if it's a raw material, a product, whatever it is, a lot of them opt to go outside and get it. But I think, especially of modern time, or sort of mid-modern time, cost has always been a huge driver when we're looking at whether you're making it or whether you're outsourcing it. So there's pros and cons to both, which we're going to go over. So when we're talking about outsourcing, we want to look at what drives you towards it. So the first one is we're looking at it from a cost perspective, which is quite an important reason, especially when that specific component or raw material that you require is a non-essential for your business operation, and it doesn't make sense for you to actually manufacture it yourself. You would rather outsource it to somebody else. It's a lot of times very common, especially when your product is quite standardized or it's quite a generic product, where a lot of times suppliers may have the advantage of economies of scale if they have to supply that same item to multiple different suppliers or multiple different customers. So you have to do a cost consideration in that respect. Secondly, you have limited facilities. So because you have a lack of production capacity, due to sometimes having limited facilities, a lot of times it would mean you going out and outsourcing this item. Basically, it means, or it happens, when your demand ends up growing a lot faster, or when your expansion of your facilities ends up failing, cannot meet that demand. So a lot of times the businesses, they then buy the parts to free up a lot of the capacity that they require. So they decide to outsource it, especially on the short term, so they can focus on vital parts of the operation itself. Then we have the lack of expertise. So a lot of times what happens is, in order for you to produce a specific item or an element, you need to have some sort of specialized capability or ability. So if you are lacking that, then you tend to outsource it or you tend to buy it out, especially if your supplier is a monopoly in producing this item. They end up buying specialized expertise. They end up buying the different tech innovation. They have research efforts that go into it. So it's the best option is to basically go out and outsource that specific component. Then we go into core business. So with core business, basically, your core business is your primary activity that makes your business basically generate revenue. So if you're concentrating on your core business, it is very strategic of you to basically be going down that road. Everything else that falls in between, so all subsequent activities that follow suit, are supportive functions. So these functions should be outsourced so you can focus on the stuff that you can. Like, for instance, if I have to look at it from a logistics perspective, my core function is courier, whether it is domestic courier or international courier. Yes, I want to dabble in air freight and sea freight and road freight, but I'm not a specialist in it. Therefore, I outsource it to the ones that are specialists in it, and I manage the process with them. So that's basically how core business in terms of outsourcing would work. Then we go into quality. So a lot of times when you decide to outsource, you want to take advantage of suppliers who have better technology, better processes, better skilled laborers, or just taking advantage of different economies of scale. So a lot of times your suppliers end up investing more money in R&D. So the quality ends up being a lot more superior than if you have to do it on your own. Okay, so drivers, very simple. It's actually quite general in terms of when you have to think about what is some of the reasons why you would rather go out and buy something as opposed to make it. Maybe don't think of it as a takeaway sort of option, but look at it from a general perspective. And a lot of these things will pop up in your head, and you would end up remembering it, for a very long time. Then we move into what are some of the drivers of making. So making, as we know, you're going to make your own materials, your components, your service, your equipment, everything is basically in-house. Some of the reasons why you would choose to rather make it as opposed to outsourcing it is number one, unreliable suppliers. Basically, if you have a supplier that's consistently arriving late, your orders are being incomplete, you're ending up with a damaged stock. So a lot of times businesses they end up taking responsibility for making those specific components or those specific parts because of unreliable suppliers. Um, so you end up failing, your business ends up failing, your revenue fails, your your competitive advantage ends up failing. So you tend to want to make it, even if it is a small portion of your business and not your core function, you end up taking the responsibility to do the manufacturing of it. The next one is protecting your proprietary technology. So a lot of times businesses invest their money in technology so that they can improve their processes, make their business a lot better. So it's necessary that they protect their technology at the end of the day. So a business can develop, whether it's equipment, a different product line, a different process, and you basically need it to be protected, especially from a competitive advantage perspective. You don't want your competitor basically doing the exact same thing that you were doing. So a lot of times businesses choose to not reveal that technology by basically keeping it in-house. You want to surprise your competitor. You want to bring new products to the market. You want to be able to charge a premium price for that product as well. Then we got into design secrecy. It's basically when you have a few businesses that make particular specific products primarily because they want to keep it a secret, whether it is a design secret or a manufacturer secret. So I don't know if any of you are watching or have watched Lincoln Lawyer. I just started watching it not too long ago, but there was I think the first season was around the guy that developed video games, and here itself, okay, he did a lot of wrong things in between, but specifically he wanted to protect his design ideas. He had designed a specific character in this video game, and based on that, he wanted to now protect the business, protect the firm. He obviously did a lot of bad things that came with it. However, he wanted to basically keep his design a secret. The next one is use existing idle capacity. And with this is basically more of a short-term solution, especially for the business, if you have too much of idle capacity, meaning that you have staff that has an 8-hour shift, but probably only works 3 to 4 hours. That makes sense. So you want to use that excess capacity to make some of your own components, okay? Especially if it's seasonal products, for instance, you have a specific season where it's a dry season, it's a specific season where it's, quite revenue based and high revenue based. So you want to use some of that idle capacity in the time that you require it. The next one is a lack of competent suppliers, very similar to the unreliable supplier portion of it. But if the component does not exist or the suppliers don't have the technology or the capability to produce it, the business or you as a business may decide that you have no choice but to make that item in-house. Even if it's from a short-term perspective, you want to develop different development strategies, whether you want to also use that strategy and give it to a supplier so that they can now become economies of scale, that you can go that outsourcing route. However, because a supplier cannot manufacture your product, that's the reason why you tend to do it in-house. And then the last one is having better control. So quality control. So quality, obviously, it's a pro on both from an outsourcing and a making specific perspective. But if a business is capable, the make option basically allows for them to have more of a direct control over the design, over the manufacturing, the labor, the high quality components, everything that's put into that product. You have full decision making on it. So you may be, much more experienced, much more efficient in that specific manufacturing portion of it. And suppliers are not. So you would rather actually, manufacture the item on your own because you have a better control system. Okay, so that's basically your make and your buy decision. Then we want to go into more of the supplier selection side. And when we're looking at how best we can choose a supplier, we want to look at various different aspects, okay? Especially if whether they're suited for the product that we require or not. So the first one is product and process. So you want to be able to have a supplier that at the end of the day holds a patent to that product or holds a patent to that specific process, where you have no choice but to buy it from them, basically. So they're following different processes, different ways of how best they can how best you can go forward with them. Willingness to share technology, so whatever they learn from a developing country or a developed country perspective, they're bringing those ideas in through to you. They're able to provide you with the best quality that they possibly can, especially if they're looking at it from a developed and a developing country perspective. Cost, a lot of times, because they're pushing out volume, they end up being more cost effective. So you would want to choose a supplier that is suitable in that aspect. You don't want to choose a supplier that is 3 times the price of your previous supplier. It just is not going to make any sense for your bottom line at the end of the day. Then you want a supplier, obviously, that is reliable, someone who's willing to come to the party, especially when you need them to come to the party. Then you have order system and cycle time, especially a supplier that can be integrated to you. So when you place an order, it's relatively easy. It runs quite a good process in terms of what your lead time is going to be, what material that was used, what your cost is, all of that. So you want to be able to choose somebody that is quite innovative in that respect. Supplier that has capacity, not a supplier that's going to tell you, I'm sorry, but I can't take your order. I can only fulfill it in a month from now. Someone who's very communicative. We all know that hiccups happen. Stuff goes wrong, but is your supplier now able to communicate it to you at the time that it happens and not try to cover up and try to win back some time when it's almost impossible to do so? Location. So you want to look at both if they are from a local or an international perspective. If it's international, you still got a diversified supplier list here. If it's international, the reason why you're choosing them, is it quality, is it cost, is it reliability? And then the last one is service. You obviously want somebody that's going to engage with you for upcoming orders. You want somebody who's going to be able to provide you with a good plan in terms of this is where they're at from a service perspective. They're reaching the different KPIs that were set out. A lot of times suppliers are KPI based. So if you have to follow a procurement process, there's different criteria that you would follow. You have to sit in on a monthly KPI. They then review you if you're sitting on 98% conformance. What is the 2% that's non-conformance? What is the reason for the non-conformance? How can we now better ourselves so we get 99% next month? So you want to review it from a service perspective. Then we want to look at KPIs. So when we looking at KPIs specifically, it is basically a performance matrix at the end of the day. It's quite critical when we're looking at how we're going to source or strategically source suppliers and how we're going to monitor their performance. So the first one you want to look at from a cost perspective, how competitive are they compared to everybody else in the same market? What is their total cost of ownership? It's not just a price, but anything from an associated cost perspective, whether it is taxes, whether it's duties that you're paying, life cycle costs that you're paying. And then lastly, you want to understand what their payment terms are. Is it flexible? Are they favorable? It's not going to come to now you're on a 30-day payment plan. It's now day 31. You haven't paid them and they're suspending your account and they're not producing for you anymore. So you need to look at all of those options. Quality, is it quite consistent? Is it quite reliable? Do they have the different quality standards like ISO accreditations or different industry certificate accreditations? And also, do they have like inspection and testing of their product? Is it as robust as you would like it to be? Then we go into delivery performance. What is the on-time delivery in terms of meeting the delivery schedules consistently? What is the lead time that it takes from them to deliver a product from time an order is placed to the time that the customer needs it? And also, are they flexible? If your quantities increase, are they able to scale up their resources? Or if it decreases, are they able to then scale down? Then we have capacity and capability, and this is from a production perspective. Can they meet your volume expectation or your volume forecast? Can they meet your technical expectation or your technical requirement in that respect? And do they have the resources that's available to meet it? Skilled labor, the materials that's required, the tech that's required, do they have all of this? Then we have financial stability. So what is the financial health of your supplier, whether it is their financial statements, their credit ratings, anything that indicates their financial strength is what you need to look at from a KPI perspective. Do they run the risk of bankruptcy? What is the likelihood of them going through different financial difficulties? So understanding it from that perspective. Then we have compliance and risk management. What is your supplier's adherence to legal requirements or to regulations, whether it is environmental, safety, labor laws? How do they best apply themselves when it comes to risk mitigation? Whether it is a disruption in the supply chain, how can they then recover from that? Sustainability and CSR, different, whether it is from an environmental sustainability, making sure that they're using eco-friendly products, eco-friendly material, or ethical sourcing. Then we have innovation and continuous improvement. Are they able to look into providing newer and more improved products or services? Are they able to use different supply chain techniques like a lean or a Six Sigma approach so that the cost drops off the product? So looking at continuous improvement, basically. Relationship management, also back on communication. Are they a good fit culturally for your business? Do they fit the same values, the same mission, the same objectives that you have as your business? And then the last one is your geographical consideration, whether it's a location, how far they're situated, or whether it is just looking at where they're situated, what is the political stability of where they are located, because that basically calls for whether your supply chain is reliable or not reliable. Okay, then we want to look at your supplier base. So the first one is, what is supplier base? So supplier base is basically as simple as it is. It's a list of your suppliers that your business is used to get its different materials, the different services, the different suppliers that they basically require. When we're looking at single sourcing specifically, you want to understand why you would actually go for single sourcing. Single sourcing meaning that you only have one supplier for that specific material or that specific component. So the first one is you would be able to establish quite a good relationship or a good rapport with this specific supplier, because it also makes it easier for you to work with. One, there's also a mutually beneficial sort of alliance between the two of you, where you can benefit from them, they can benefit from you. So you can see there's a lot of repetition when you're talking about single sourcing, outsourcing, etc. You have less problems when it comes to quality, because you have the same technology, the same processes to produce the same parts. So your quality is not very varied. You have lower costs because you're buying from one, you get economies of scale. You have transport economics because you're getting from one specific supplier. How logistics works, consolidation is key. You end up getting full truckloads as opposed to less than truckload rates. When you're moving full truckloads, the business has options to move it at various carriers, whether it is a sea or a rail or a road, as opposed to using air freight, which is a more expensive option, because less than container load, sometimes you actually want to get it in as air freight as opposed to sea. And then proprietary product, okay, which is basically if you do have a product or a specific item that is a proprietary process, if your supplier holds that specific patent, they have no choice but to buy it just from that supplier. Then we have where your volume is too small for it to split. If your requirement is very small, it's actually not worthwhile for you to split that order amongst various suppliers. It just doesn't make any financial sense. So using a single sourcing option is the best approach for your specific business, especially if it's like non-vital suppliers, non-vital services, etc. Then we want to go into multiple suppliers, right? So when we're looking at wanting multiple suppliers, firstly, you want to understand what is the capacity. So when your demand exceeds the capacity of using one supplier, you now need to go and look for different suppliers to get your items out from. So you need the capacity of different suppliers. The next one is you want to spread the risk, especially when you have a supply chain disruption. Like when COVID hit, suppliers were scarce. You now want to be able to split it. I think even from a logistics perspective, a lot of people had to bite the bullet because different companies weren't going into different areas. So instead of having one single supplier from a logistics perspective, a lot of businesses looked at various different companies. Number one, from a cost perspective, and number two, into areas where they were strong. So a lot of people played to each other's strengths at the end of the day. You want to create competition, especially when you're using a lot of suppliers. It encourages and it pushes competition amongst the suppliers, whether it's from a price perspective or a quality perspective. You don't want a monopoly because a monopoly can charge any price that they want. So you wanna try and encourage as much competition as possible. And then we have information. And here it basically means when you have multiple suppliers, you usually have a little bit more information when it comes to market conditions or new products that have been developed or different technology that has entered the market. So it's very important that you have an understanding of what those different life cycles are, basically. So this is how you would look at a supplier base, whether you would opt into going for something that is more single sourcing or something that is more multiple sourcing. So you want to look at your supplier base and then make a decision from that perspective. Okay, and then the last one, I'm just going to make this slightly bigger. Okay, and then the last one is understanding and evaluating what your sourcing process is. So when we're looking at the sourcing process specifically, there's a lot of interrelated tasks that go into the actual process. Um, whether it means how you're going to get information, what is the information being used for, what is the different purchasing power to find the best possible values in the marketplace. So you want to look at this specific diagram itself and sort of follow the sourcing process. So the first one is you want to understand and identify what is the need that your business requires from a fulfillment perspective. You want to define and reevaluate what your requirements are going to be from those specific needs. You then need to make a decision on whether you're going to outsource it or you're going to make it yourself. Then you're going to identify the type of purchases you want to make. Maybe it's a specific line, a specific product, a specific component. You need to understand that. Then you're going to go into conducting a market analysis for it, understanding the demands of the market, understanding the supplies, what suppliers are involved, what is the political market looking like, anything that can disrupt your market trend, whether it's seasonality or non-seasonality. You want to decide using also historic data, what is the market looking like? You want to identify possible suppliers that can provide you that specific service for those specific products that you require. You then run through an RFP or an RFQ with those suppliers, a whole lot of information, product, cost, quality, time frame, location, triple BE, and allocate point system so you can pre-screen these possible suppliers. Then you evaluate the remaining supplier base. So the entire supplier base that you now have, you're going to now re-evaluate it to understand that everybody's following a specific KPI. You then choose the supplier that you want, that is going to basically take your business over the mark. And then you go into performing the service or purchase them, and then there's an after sale. Has the product been of the quality that you required at the cost that you wanted it to be? Will you go back to the supplier or not? So as much as it's a sourcing process, it's also a sales process for your suppliers. They run the process with you so that you can understand and they can understand what the requirements are set out from base level up, on how to move forward in that specific partnership or that specific supplier relationship itself. Okay, so this is basically strategic sourcing, outsourcing, sourcing process, multiple sourcing, and single sourcing. This specific learning unit is very important. You can see that it's very, very fairly easy to understand. There's obviously some technicalities that's in it, but it's quite general. If you have to break it down, use examples, especially if it's examples from your current workplace. If you're sitting in a purchasing role or you're sitting in a procurement role, or you're sitting in a role where you're an entrepreneur, how can you go about finding a supplier? What processes do you need? How do you choose the best one that fits your business? So asking these relevant questions is very important for you as a business, and for your business to basically take it forward. Okay. I think that basically brings us to the end of Learning Unit 2, Theme 1 and Theme 2. Is there any questions so far? I take that as nothing. Okay, perfect. No problem. Next week, the 10th, I think, of March, we will not have a live lecture. It will be a recording. We'll close off Learning Unit 2 in that session. So please look out for that recording. It will be shared probably by like Wednesday, I would say. And then the following week, we will then have a live lecture. At least 2 weeks before your assignment, I want to Sorry, something just happened to my network there. But I will plan that and I will on our group. So you have it. Do not miss that session. It is very important. A lot of times students end up missing that and they don't listen to the recording and they then ask questions and they don't get the answer that they want or in the time period that they wanted. I mean, I have students sending me messages at 1 o'clock in the morning. So let's just be very well prepared for the assessments in the semester. I like to pre-plan it. I don't want to give you any reason for you to not submit on time or not to get a good mark. Okay, there's no questions. You guys have a fantastic evening and we will chat again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.